Today we are talking about how to change careers without starting over. This is one of the biggest concerns that I hear with people considering career changes, this idea that all of the time and energy and money that they have invested in this particular career path will be wasted, the fear that they were going to have to start at the bottom of the ladder, that they are going to take a huge pay cut, that it's going to take a ton of time to build new credibility and position themselves in this new career path. So let's start unpacking these beliefs because they are just not true. You do not have to start over in any sort of way if you are committed to making a career change. Hi, I'm Caroline from Caroline Adams Coaching. I had all these questions and more, and these fears of thinking that I had to start over and take a huge pay cut actually prevented me from following a number of different paths over the years. It's why it took me so long to actually leave corporate and become a career coach. And even once I fully committed to coaching, a whole new crop of beliefs came about around what it meant to be a new coach. Even though I'd had a almost 20 year successful career, I had fears about, will I be credible in this new career? So I'm going to share with you 3 career change beliefs, a really powerful mindset shift that will help you think much differently about the need to start over, and then 4 really crunchy, practical things you can do or not do to actually bring these 3 truths into practice for you. So let me first share the career change truths. Number 1, you do not have to take a pay cut. You don't. Number 2, all your experience is transferable. Every single thing you have done to date is transferable, assuming you want to take it forward. And number 3, even the things you see as gaps are actually benefits. So I'm going to unpack all of those with you in just a moment. First, I want to share this mindset shift. So somehow in our twisted brains, we take the idea that starting something new in our career means starting over. I'm going to let you have that sink in for a minute. Starting something new does not mean starting over. And so just to bring this point home, I want to give you a visual. I want you to imagine yourself kind of walking on your career path, right? And you're walking to this big, beautiful horizon that is career utopia. And you reach a crossroads. So you have all these different potential paths and opportunities you could take going forward. And so the idea that we start over in this visual would mean that we leave that crossroads and we go all the way back to the beginning of where we started, right? This is just not true because we couldn't have reached those crossroads without taking all of the steps that we took. In fact, it is the very path and it is everything that you have done to date that allowed you to arrive at these crossroads in the first place. And so I want you to shift your thinking. You are not starting over. You are just embarking on something new, or even better, just the latest fork in the road. This is really, really important. And I want you to get super, super curious about why you are actually thinking you need to start over. Because I'm going to tell you, it's not a universal truth. There are people in the world, believe it or not, that go through life not believing they have to start over in their careers when they want to make a change. And they just pivot. They just move. They just go. They have a conversation. They start a business. So the idea that we have to start over, this is a belief that a lot of us have, but it's not necessarily true. And so I invite you to get super, super curious about where that belief comes from for you. Why do you believe that you have to start over? And if you want to stick around to the end, I'm going to actually share where that belief originated for me and actually how, once I identified that story, what I actually did to shift the story and take the lesson from it. All right, so let's get into the 4 very practical things that you can do to get yourself on this path to a career change. So number 1, please stop looking at job postings. Of course, if you look at job postings, you are going to feel inadequate, underqualified, undereducated, and kind of not enough with every single bullet, especially if those are in a new area that is unfamiliar to you. Job descriptions are a wish list. I wish I could convey to you how little time and effort, this is not a good thing, but so little time and effort goes into actually creating job descriptions, and they're not written from the perspective of how to be successful in a role. Because if they were written from that perspective, a number of different people would see how their unique backgrounds and educations and experience would actually be a direct tie to this role. And instead, job descriptions are written from a very biased perspective around education, background, lived experience that convey and make it seem like there's only one way to be successful, or there's only one profile that you must have to fit into this role. And that is just not true. So please stop looking at job postings. That brings us into our second very practical thing to do. Okay, Caroline, I won't look at job postings. What do I do? All right, you are going to talk to people and you are going to connect the dots and tell the story. And so what do I mean by this? So I'm going to drop a link below to a blog post that gives a lot more information and some prompts around this, but I want to illustrate this with a story. So I worked with someone who worked with one company for most of her career, but she had worked all over the company, different locations, totally different areas of the company. And she was really concerned that this kind of looked spotty. And so as she thought about the next place she wanted to move in the company, she was like, how do I actually pivot into the space? I'm all over the place. And it was when she actually looked at not the individual postings and positions that she had sat in, but actually zoomed way out and looked at the story. She was the one that recognized, oh, I'm the person that comes in, fixes underperforming teams, and helps align those teams to the business goals. And she had a really specific way she would come in. She had like a methodology she didn't even realize she had. And it's actually the creation of that story that helped her position herself for a totally new area. And in fact, the fact that she had worked in all of these different areas and had done the same thing actually bolstered her case. She's like, oh, you have an underperforming team. That's what I do. Let me come into this brand new area and do that for you. So hopefully this is starting to get you thinking in the right direction. Or maybe you're saying, Caroline, that's all well and good. I want to make a totally different change. And I think this is where, again, a lot of people get stuck on labels. I want to make a big change, so I'm focusing on, well, how do I justify moving from law to the entertainment industry? Or how do I move from project management to strategy? Or how do I talk about the fact that I've been in event planning and I want to move to interior design? And those are the wrong things to focus on. So this brings us to our principle that everything is transferable. Every single thing you've done to date is transferable because it's about your experience. It's not the subject matter. People get so caught up in the subject matter. It is you and how you approach every single situation, right? Your values, your strengths, your unique point of view, the way you solve problems, the way you lead people, that's transferable. And that is the way to talk about how you can come in day one and make an impact anywhere. So let's talk about pay. So I want to illustrate this. Well, first of all, let me just say, here's a mindset shift and a mantra that you can adopt right now. You do not have to accept any less pay than what you want. No one is going to make you take a pay cut. No one's going to make you. And so by setting the boundary for yourself, I'm going to make X or more, great. Now you've just filtered out all of the stuff that's going to waste your time, make you unhappy, make you feel like you're starting over. And now you can focus on finding those opportunities and figuring out how you're going to do it, as opposed to worrying about, oh, someone's going to make me take less. Only you are going to let you take less. Now I want to share an extreme example, but hopefully another illustration of how I want you to think about pay and value. I want you to think about all these CEOs and very senior executives that jump from one completely disconnected thing to another, right? Let's say you're an airline CEO and you start a music label. Let's say you're an online retailer and you decide you're going to go to space or start a new healthcare product that's going to transform the healthcare industry. No one says to them, you have to start over on this new idea. You have to start at the bottom and accept entry-level pay. No one says that. And in fact, they are lauded for, oh my gosh, they're going to break this idea wide open. They're the thinker that we need in this space. And so if we think that way about these super senior people, why are you discounting your own experience? Why are you saying, all right, I have X years of experience, those don't count? You have, in your experience, led teams, led people, influenced, delivered products and projects. You've probably built some cool stuff. You've probably averted tragedy. All of the things that you've done, that is what you will need to be successful in the new role. And so focus on those things. So there's a question of kind of level and coming in at the right level, both in terms of pay and kind of your purview in an organization and your level of influence. And so lead with those things. Which brings us to our last very practical thing, and probably my favorite, which is the perceived gap is actually a benefit. There's this concept called, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, it's called Shoshin from Zen Buddhism. And it's the idea of beginner's mindset. And it's this idea that we look at something new from a completely clear, open perspective with no preconceived ideas. And we're really prepared to learn as if we're seeing it for the first time. And I think it's so interesting that so few of us, we probably like something on Instagram, but how often do you actually give yourself the space to act like a true beginner? And what I think is so interesting about this is every single career changer comes to me and says, Caroline, I'm stuck in a rut. I'm so sick of the grind and the same old. I'm not growing, I'm not learning. And yet, in order to grow and learn and get to that next level and have that new experience, there's got to be a gap. There has to be a gap. And yet, whenever we see a gap with a career change or something new or a pivot to a new industry or sort of role, we see that gap as a bad thing, as opposed to, oh no, this is the very thing I've been looking for. And bringing along with it all the things that we can do day one. And so I really encourage you to embrace the gap, truly embrace it. And as you are talking to people and as you are looking for opportunities and kind of figuring out the right way to position yourself and the right amount of money to accept and what you are worth coming into this day one, I really encourage you to embrace that gap, both in terms of, this is the thing I'm really looking for in my career. And as you position it to the person that you're talking to, I can bring you the fresh perspective because I haven't been mired in your ways of doing things. Or the person that's been looking at this problem for 20 years and position that as what it is, which is really valuable. I promised at the beginning that I would share with you my story of where my fear of starting over came from. My fear came, as most fears and limiting beliefs and stories that we tell ourselves that are disempowering, it came from childhood. And it came from watching my mom, who had a career in speech pathology, lose her hearing. And lose her hearing pretty suddenly and pretty completely devastatingly. And as you know, hearing is not only important for pretty much any career where you need to communicate or interact with people, connect with people, but it's really important when you're a speech pathologist. And I hadn't realized it, but I had internalized the struggle, right, of watching her both lose her hearing and grapple with that and then pivot and try to find a new career. And so I watched her go through that, and I had internalized that story as one of great hardship and something to be avoided at all costs. And the beauty of recognizing, oh my gosh, my fear is coming from this story, helped me reconnect with what actually happened, the rest of that story. And the rest of that story is, and I'm not going to say it was easy, and certainly it's not even my place to tell you what my mom's personal experience was. The rest of that story was she used that to pivot into finding a career that not only supported her and reasonable accommodations for what she needed to be successful in her career, but a career that was dedicated to helping others with disabilities and other challenges in finding work and finding education, and really finding her calling. Oftentimes these limiting beliefs and these stories that we save for ourselves that keep us stuck, it's only part of the story. And so I invite you to reconnect with that story that caused the fear and look at it from the perspective of what was the lesson that you learned? What did it teach you? And how can you actually take that forward? Because it is a fear, it is not a truth. You do not have to start over. So make sure you are telling yourself the whole story. I would love to hear your comments below, and I'll talk to you soon.